Hi, everybody. I'm Mary Rowe from the Canadian Urban Institute. Pleased to welcome you to another one of these really important mobilization sessions that the Canada Healthy Communities Initiative is helping make possible with our partners, Community Foundations of Canada and us at CUI, and then a number of important partners that have helped build this program and continue to build the capacity of the sector to make places more equitable, more resilient, and more in tune with what people actually need locally on the ground. This session is extraordinarily important because it's talking about equity and how we ensure that we're working with equity-seeking communities, in particular with the Black community. And so the partners today are going to tackle that very specific topic. I'll just do the land acknowledgement first, and just to recognize that we at CUI and all of our partners are coming to terms with the legacy of exclusion that urbanism practices have perpetuated, including how it manifests in terms of anti-Black racism and the kind of constraints that we've placed on people who are from different cultural backgrounds and different kinds of circumstances to participate. And the Canada Healthy Communities Initiative is a way to make some interventions and for people in communities to work to create places that are much more inclusive. So I happen to be in Toronto today, which is a very, very sunny, humid day here and lots of construction around me. I hope you're not hearing all that spill. I hope you'll all step into the chat and tell us where you're coming in from, because it's so important for us to all learn from each other in different contexts. Toronto is the traditional territory of many First Nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, home now to many diverse First Nations, Inuit and Métis, covered by Treaty 13 and the Williams Treaty. And as I suggested, this is not an easy fix. This is everyday, intentional, taking steps to make sure that we do things very differently. And COVID's giving us a rather perverse opportunity to try to correct the ways in which these things have manifested during COVID. You can see these exclusionary practices and how it's hit disproportionately vulnerable communities, and particularly communities of color. So these sessions, as you know, we're in round 2 of the Canada Healthy Communities Initiative. And so lots of you may have participated last time round in the mobilization sessions through round 1. But the important thing is that we're going to continue to learn and continue to adopt best practices and hear from folks what are the best approaches. And also we want to share with each other what's not working, where have we failed, and how do we learn best from those lessons? How do we learn faster, fail faster? So this isn't a how-to session for the HCI. You can go online to the HCI, and somebody will put that up in the chat. You can go onto the session and find out lots and lots of details about how you can actually get more information about how to apply. But if you want to, if you have questions that you can't get answered actually looking at that, then the CHCI has a help desk that Community Foundations has set up, which is open Monday to Friday, and they're happy to help you. So feel free to send those questions into there. And again, go to the CHCI website. You'll see the platform. You'll see how to do that. As you know, the CHCI is putting resources into communities, and communities are applying for various projects, and a number of them were funded in the last round, and now another group will be funded this time. And the deadline for this round is the 25th of June. You got lots of time to collaborate and to really dream up and work practically with different kinds of partners. This is part of the challenge of HCI, is that you work with folks different from you, different from, have different perspectives and different backgrounds, and charities and not-for-profits, municipalities, community groups, BIAs, you're all eligible. And if you're concerned about your eligibility, you can go to the website, find that out. There is a map that is going to go live on the later this month, actually in a few days, which is going to be fantastic, so that you'll actually be able to see the distribution of the resources and all the exciting stuff that's going on across the country. And this is the challenge for Canada, folks, is we're a big, vast place. And how do we create better connective tissue between us so that we can learn, how are they doing it in Antigonish? How are they doing it in Kelowna? Have we tried this? Have we tried that? So we're going to encourage you to use this program and use these sessions as a way to build our own capacity as a country to have locally driven solutions, and that we can learn more quickly from each other about how to do these things. And so if you're one of those folks who applied and are disappointed you didn't get funding in the first round, just know that you can reapply for the second round, but also that there may be other kinds of funding sources you can be pursuing and other kinds of partnerships that you can be cultivating as you participate in this program or these mobilization sessions. That there's, as you can see from the partners that are participating in the HCI initiative, look, ICLI, Viva en Ville, 80 cities, there's just a tremendous groundswell of support for communities wanting to take these kinds of projects on. And today, because our specific topic is about how do we build equity through digital solutions and with Black and other equity-seeking communities, the partners that are working with us today, Jerry Coe from Mars, Denise Challenger and Karen Diop from the Network for the Advancement of Black Communities. Maybe you guys can just flip your screens on so that they know I'm not making it up, and they'll know that you're for real, because this session is yours. And NABC, there they are, with beautiful backdrops, if I may say. NABC is a catalyst for collective wisdom and action to address these long-standing systemic disparities in Black communities. And it's terrific that NABC is right there informing this process and available to you to talk about how do we not waste the opportunity that we've got now to really do things differently and to create interventions that are much more effective at serving communities of color and to be able to really affect the system of how these things get perpetuated. So, and NABC is a network. They've got a whole collective impact strategy, which we are very appreciative to learn from and appreciative to benefit from their expertise. So again, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. This is an ongoing kind of conversation. We always say that that this is not, we always say this isn't the end, it's always the beginning, and we're on a journey. And it's a process, and we want this to go on as long as we possibly can as we learn and build our own collective capacity. So I'm going to pass it back to Denise and Karen, and I'm going to turn my camera off, and it's over to you two. So thanks, gals, for joining us, and very excited to hear what you're going to say and how you're going to mobilize us. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Mary. I think we can go to the next slide. Thank you. Hello everyone, bonjour à tous. I'm Karen and I'm glad to represent NAPSI today, so the Network for the Advancement of Black Communities. Few words about NAPSI. So NAPSI is a catalyst, as Mary said, for collective wisdom and action to address long-standing disparities, systemic disparities in Black communities. We care about the collective impact of NAPSI as a network, and critical to this endeavor is our ability to create collaborative learning and capacity building opportunities. So we're here today because digital solutions are critical in today's world to address the challenges of COVID-19. In the first round of funding for the Healthy Communities Initiative, there are some great projects that have been funded to create digital solutions to address some of the COVID-19 challenges, such as isolation and mental health. In today's session, we want to amplify the importance of equity in developing digital solutions with the Black communities. We know that some Black-led and Black-focused organizations need to develop solutions in partnerships with allies in the community. And it's important that equity is at the center of this work so that we are all contributing towards a healthy and equitable communities. Since the pandemic has started, NAPSI has run a community engagement series and collaborated on reports that discuss the impact of COVID-19 on Black nonprofit and grassroots groups. So before we discuss more in depth what solution can be developed, my colleague Denise will share some of our findings with you. Over to you, Denise.
Okay, thank you, Karen, and thank you to those of you who found the time to join us today. Part of my role as the network weaver at NAPSI is to help build trust among organizations and to help folks connect and self-organize, which is why I'm excited to be here today. We're aiming to provide avenues for new collaborative projects and grants to take place both between and amongst Black-led, serving, and focused organizations, as well as allies interested in working towards more equitable futures. Next slide, please. Before we put our innovative hats on to discuss solutions, digital or otherwise, to building healthier communities, I would like to provide context and reorient us towards some of the structural or systemic challenges that many Black people, and this is Toronto-based, I must admit, not that we are the center of Canada in any way, shape, or form, but just to discuss some of the systemic challenges, high level, that Black communities were facing prior to the pandemic. Next slide. On a broader level, 85% of Black Torontonians were victims of hate crimes that were ongoing. Next slide. 42% of Black children make up 42% of children in care with the Children's Aid Society. And our next slide. We're also dealing with issues related to early leavers of high school. 23% of students, Black students, left high school before completing. And the next slide. And we're at 13% of the unemployment rate. Black Torontonians nearly doubled the provincial rate. So these are just some of the broader overviews of the conditions that the Black community was facing prior to the pandemic. And if we go to the next slide. In April 2020, NAPSI supported C, the Center for Young Black Professionals, who led consultations with Black-led, serving, and Black-focused organizations, what we often call the 3Bs, to determine their needs during COVID, and produced this report that's on the screen. And there's also a slide that will give you access to it so you can do further reading. And it is in the context of the structural inequalities that I outlaid, that I just reviewed, that we had to face some of the additional challenges ongoing in the pandemic. So as we're thinking, this is just a context, if you can think how to be innovative, it's to kind of give you a sense of what is ongoing with the Black community. So on top of what we just mentioned, if we go to the next slide, what was reported to us in terms of the major concerns of Black communities was a question of income insecurity, not only worrying about job loss, but also having a lack of tools to be able to apply for a lot of that emergency fund and relief that was available. Was a big challenge during the early part of the pandemic and to some extent now. And the next issue that we had, if we can move over to the next slide, was physical and social isolation. It exacerbated conditions of anxiety and depression and other mental health challenges, as well as access to mental health support. And if we could go to the next slide, some of the broader issues were related to e-learning. So there was, on the one hand, lack of access to laptops, iPads, or cell phones, or just even the broadband for Wi-Fi. And not being in school meant that there was less chance to reinforce positive socializing and social behavior. And there were also the challenges of parents having to teach their kids in spaces that were not necessarily conducive to teaching as well. And in the next slide, we also look at questions of housing. People were worried, a lot of the members of the Black community's rent, and people were worried about eviction at high levels. And even when we're dealing with homelessness, questions of room for the shelters were some of the issues that members of organizations, grassroots, and nonprofit were helping other members of the Black community to deal with. And last but not least, and this is not an exhaustive list, I just wanted high level, questions of food insecurity. Being able to get food on the table or having lack of information on how to get food. And I remember particularly in the middle of the crisis, someone called me at NAPSI who ran a food shelter or gave out food on Sundays in a parking lot. And once the pandemic hit, his numbers doubled and he just felt really stressed from not having enough food to provide for the increased needs of the community and where to go for that type of support. So these are some of the major issues on top of the earlier issues that members of the Black communities have been dealing with. And if we go to the next slide, I just wanted us to remind us that the Black community, although we sometimes say it as a singular, is not a monolith, but rather a plurality. And our needs are expansive and peculiar. So out of this list that we have here, which you can read, we're dealing with people who are issues of post-incarceration. Some people are undocumented. I would just like to talk a little bit about the LGBTQ2S community, who also published a report. The Domino Project in Parkdale, Toronto, published a report to gather some information about what were the needs specific to that community. So on this slide, the next slide, they faced many of the similar concerns of the broader Black community, but many times people in the LGBTQ community were concerned about using public transit. And if they weren't able to get to places through walking, it meant more isolation or expensive cab rides. And especially for youth that were transitioning, not being able to get their medication. So for instance, if someone was taking medication so they'd have less facial hair, not being able to access that information, now having to deal with having more facial hair was also another form of anxiety or stress for them. So I would like us to go to the next slide. And just to point out to you, because it's just a quick overview, the resources that I used to present this information is in the slide that I think it will be shared with the group. The Black Health Alliance's website, it's an organization, but their website has a lot of information on what's going on today, right now with COVID-19 and how other Black communities are self-organizing. And I also just wanted to point out to the Black Professionals in Tech Network. They are also doing some work and are also a resource for people who want to collaborate. And if we could go to the last and final slide for my part, I just wanted to reiterate that many Black and racialized grassroots groups and organizations have been working on and through the issues that the pandemic has exacerbated and or highlighted. And I'm going to pass the mic, our virtual mic, on to Jerry to discuss some of these recent projects and invite you to be inspired and to craft a collaborative and equitable path to recovery. Thank you. And Jerry? Thank you.
Can we move on to the next slide? Thank you. Yes, so if you're here at this mobilization session, you've already read gone through the website with fine-tooth comb, you know that there is one stream within the grant on digital solutions that are meant to help fund projects that provide digital solutions using data and technology in innovative ways to connect people, to improve their health, or to facilitate public engagement. And as we just heard earlier, there are many communities, particularly Black racialized communities, who are really suffering through this period. But these communities are also strong. They are trying to figure out solutions. Many of them are already working on various different solutions to support one another. And so whether you are one of these community innovators or you're someone who think you can help, particularly using digital means, that this is where you should be. And I hope in the next couple of minutes I can share a couple of interesting examples that have moved that we've seen. Next slide, please. So first and foremost, digital is really one of those things that can be quite divisive, particularly through COVID. We've seen how the digital divide can actually cause significantly more harm to certain groups while elevating certain groups. So we certainly want to make sure that whatever digital solutions we're going to move forward on, that it will in fact be mission-oriented, that it will have a strong purpose, that it will be about the people, the partners that you're working with, and it'll serve to help those people who are most impacted by COVID-19, that it is a solution, a mission, and a set of solutions that you have developed not just on your own, but with the people that its purpose is in fact to help and support. And so these mission-oriented types of solutions should have these clearly stated purpose, have a very clear sense of who you're working with and who you're supporting, and then finally a way to organize and activate these solutions. Next slide, please. In the following slides, you can see a bunch of different solutions. I'm not going to go through all of it. You will get the slides after this. Feel free to peruse them in more details. I thought I'll start off with these three rather interesting projects. Layup is a Toronto-based program that takes basketball sessions into the homes. this is particularly important, as we know, through COVID, physical and mental health has been a particular challenge for young people, especially young people who with low-income families who don't have a lot of resources. And this program is really helping young people get the exercise they need, but also more importantly, connect socially through these sessions with other young people as well. Ethos Lab is based in Vancouver. It was started by one of the co-founders, is a Black mother who was really concerned that in Vancouver, there was really not a lot of cultural specific programs for her child and for other Black youth, racialized youth from families in the neighborhood as well. So Ethos Lab, very interestingly, think of this as a SimCity, a virtual world for learning STEM and other academic skills through fun and games. So they've been around since before COVID, and during COVID, they've really become quite a strong pillar for young people, not just to learn STEM, but also to connect with one another. And just one more example, with the festival, with the Social Development Center of Waterloo region, really taking a bit of an inspiration from the Festival of Neighborhoods that they've been running for a couple of years, and now bring it online in a way that is really quite cool, creating these story maps of these events and experiences that you could have that can help you ensure that you experience them in a very safe way through the digital apps that they're going to be rolling out. So just 3 examples of how community innovators are reimagining community living in a safe way through COVID-19. Next slide, please. Yep, so in the next couple of slides, I'm going to cycle through a lot faster. So in the previous slide, we looked at just 3 broad ways of how digital is helping to support community living, to give a semblance of normalcy. In the next couple of slides, we're going to look at other ways that people are using digital solutions to help people most impacted by COVID-19 through this period. So the most common one that you can see is digital help, helping one another, helping those people who are unable to help, who need help. So neighboring, serving seniors, the Friendly Neighbor Hotline in Toronto. These are examples of using a hybrid of both digital and analog platforms to help people who are stuck at home because they're unable to go out at all, because they are fragile, to be able to match volunteers to them to help them pick up groceries, to help them pick up prescriptions, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. Another area that's seen a lot of activity is digital food security, right? Next to health, of course, you need food, you need good food. And so these are just a couple of examples of how various different organizations are using digital platforms to work together and also to work with the clients they serve to better deliver good nutrition to these families. Next slide, please. And then, of course, there is community safety, keeping everyone safe. So these are not necessarily a solution that has been adopted by any community per se, but the kind of technology that's already out there from, from TurboVax to people like Lane, these various different technology vendors who now have solutions that would allow us to help keep public spaces safe. So ranging from wide open, open air public spaces to the lobbies of buildings, helping to ensure that the right number of people are in there to keep things safe, traffic marshalling, and so on and so forth, right down to being able to monitor that people are keeping safe distance within an entire building as well. Next slide, please. And of course, coming back to community living, one aspect of it truly is about community engagement, right? How do we continue to have fun? How do we continue to connect to one another during these times? So our indigenous communities have been particularly innovative and quick in turning their events online. So powwow, social distance powwow, these are just examples of how these various different festivals were very, very quickly turned into online events that would allow young young people, to young Indigenous people to participate in these festivals and to be able to perform in these festivals from the safety of their own home. And of course, from a professional standpoint, the Black Professionals in Tech Network, other than offering a opportunity to network with others, they also put together one of the most innovative online conference I've seen late last year, October. It's a fully online conference, makes you feel like you're actually physically there, being able to visit booths, etc. Really cool stuff. And Ethos Lab, we mentioned a little bit earlier, not only do they use their virtual space for teaching STEM and other skills, they also use their Ethos Lab for celebrations as well. And so good category to really get into. Next slide, please. And then, of course, we've got digital employment, right? So how various different organizations are switching very, very quickly to digital, using digital means, digital platforms to help train young people, help train mid-career switch people, as well as just doing interviews in a safe way online. So people like Digital Me, so Mars itself, our Opportunity for All Youth program, was also able to very quickly create an interview platform to help at-risk young people, match them to jobs, and then get them to be placed in those jobs through these digital interviews. Next slide, please. Now, then the next two slides are all about commerce, right? And you might be wondering, well, I thought this is only available for nonprofits. Well, you know, the various different BIAs, business and improvement associations, etc. You're all eligible for this, as well as municipalities, of course, right? That and these are just a couple of examples of how digital Main Street type initiative have helped to put our main streets, our small businesses online, help them go online very, very quickly, help them get matched to various different resources available to help them go online very quickly. Next slide, please. At the very and if you want to be a little bit more sophisticated, you could even get into buy local type programs. So these are just a couple of examples where these platforms would incentivize people to buy, either buy local or buy from specific communities. You get currencies, credits that you can only use with certain shops or within certain municipalities. Thank you. Next slide. Now, as we said earlier, I think access, digital divide, you know, or even whether you have the physical space to use these digital services is one of those big problems. And so we are also seeing at the same time municipalities as well as other organizations trying to fill the gap here through Wi-Fi, broaden longer Wi-Fi hotspots services, but also hotspot lending. So, for example, you can go to the Toronto Public Library and borrow a cellular Wi-Fi hotspot if you don't have an internet connection at home, and that would allow you to be able to do that. So some of the libraries will also allow you to borrow tablets as well. So if you're thinking about if your target audience is low income, likely not to have either internet or digital devices, you know, it'd be great for you to also then think about partnering up with a local service provider that would give them hotspots or give them tablets, or partner with someone, convince someone to provide this service, just apply to the grant. Next slide, please. And finally, of course, we've got various different digital data sets coming out. So not to forget, within the stream, also eligible is a section around providing digital data sets that can help people, help organizations through COVID-19 safely. Next slide. So you must be wondering, where am I getting all of these from? Well, some of these is because, you know, this is what I do and I know about them, but you can also go on to City Share Canada, the Canadian Urban Institute's website, and you see a ton of great examples of how people are doing this. Next slide. Right, so just to recap again, these digital solutions are fantastic. You know, they can play a significant role in contributing to health, but these are not neutral. So we have to be careful about how we're doing this. And with this, I want to pass it on to my colleague to tell you more about this.
Thank you, Jerry. So I think there's a common understanding that digital solutions can play a significant role in contributing to community health. The question we must ask ourselves now is, how do we implement those solutions with an equity lens? J. Peters' Equity Guidance Checklist provide us with a great framework. So J. Peters is an award-winning placemaker whose practice mitigates growing divides in cities across North America. She spearheads institutional city building projects specializing in public space design and policy, forgotten densities, mobility equity, gender responsive design, inclusive public engagement, and healing food sites. I will share in a few her website. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. So what we can say is that a careful review of the equity guidance on the CHCI website is important and provides a set of consideration for equitable partnerships, programming, and community engagement. I will share the link right now to the chat. Yeah, we can go to the next slide. So, so the equity guidance checklist will help us pay attention to three main things: partnerships, programming, community engagement, and impact. For example, for partnerships, a couple of things to pay attention to. We want to acknowledge and recognize Black community expertise. We want to be able to allocate necessary budget, to create space and share decision-making processes, to publicly recognize contribution and expertise of the Black community, as well as conveying that collaboration is a core value. For programming, we want to represent the community that we're serving at the leadership level, and we want to be intentionally intersectional. We want to consider physical and social safety as priorities, as well as developing indicators and metrics to assess the Black community's social and well-being, and consider social, as well as considering social determinants of health. For the question around community engagement and impact, we want to make sure that we identify initiatives that are relevant for the Black communities based on data. We want to validate project and progress with key community stakeholders. We also want to consider the social and political history of the site or the community that you are planning to serve. We want to consider unintended consequences such as gentrification, displacement, issues of safety that may affect Black communities. We also want to build capacity and create opportunities for the community to develop skills and capacities. And finally, consider how the initiative proposed can be sustainable. Yeah, that's next slide, thank you. So I'll pass it on to Clary once again.
Yes, so just a couple more resources that you might find useful. We've got a bunch of toolkit resources for startups. So that was their primary audience. You will find that some of those toolkits, the business models, how to develop your value proposition and business model using customer validation. So a couple of these things could be useful to help you think about your initiative, to help you plan for and help you advance your initiative. Thank you. Next slide, please. Yep. So just a couple more there as well. Throughout this process, you'll want to think about how to prototype with your users, with the communities that you want to help. So you're developing solutions with them and not just for them. You want to make sure that you're thinking through community engagement in a smart way, particularly because of COVID. You're not able to do the usual type of user outreach and engagement in person. How do you do that in a safe way? That also helps you learn about to really be able to validate what is it that the community need or can help them through COVID-19. Next slide, please. Right, and so with that, I've come to the end of the session. You're going to find on the website a bunch of other digital solution examples as well. Here are just a couple that is from the Healthy Community Initiative Applicant Guide. And with that, I will now give it back to RuPaul for Q&A.
Hello, everyone. My name is RuPaul. I'm with Canadian Urban Institute. Thank you so much to our amazing presenters today from NAPSI and Mars. I know that we don't have the question and answer function enabled today, but we do have this chat, and I'm hoping that a couple of folks on the call who've got a couple of burning questions might be able to drop some questions into the chat. And while we do that, I will ask a quick question, and this is open to Denise, Karen, or Jerry. But can you give the folks on this call right now an example of a time where maybe you tried something out with the community that you were unfamiliar working with and it didn't go so well, and what kind of lesson you might want to leave the rest of us here with that you painfully learned at some point? Jerry, you're nodding, so I'm going to maybe ask you first. You seem like you're remembering something.
Yeah, this almost always comes up, right? So these days it happens less with us because, you know, with age comes some wisdom, not all the wisdom that you need. It comes with you get a little wiser with each time you fall. But yeah, so I remember, you know, going to Vancouver and trying to figure out with the Vancouver community organizations on how to engage local youth. How do we get local youth into employment? And of course, you know, like you go in and think, hey, you know, how different can youth employment look like in Toronto versus Vancouver? We're all metropolitan cities, right? How different can it be? Of course, it's completely different because of the way the programs are funded, because of the way the community organizations work with one another, you know, because BC has a completely different not completely different, but a significantly different youth employment framework than what Ontario does, which then filters down to everything, which then really changes the dynamics of how individual community organizations work with one another. So the biggest lesson learned we had there was, you know, really understanding, first of all, not just the young people that we wanted to benefit, but also the service providers that we were trying to work with, how different that power dynamics, or rather the relationships, work, so that we could actually come up with the kind of digital solutions that would work not just to benefit the young people, not just to benefit the employers, but most importantly, that would also benefit the service providers themselves, so they don't feel, you know, either cut out of the solution, or that we are actually, you know, going in and doing the whole big Toronto thing and ending up completely losing them in the process. Yeah.
Karen or Denise, anybody want to jump in before I move to the next question?
I don't mind jumping in. I think we haven't done, I mean, Karen and I have worked together for at least a year now, doing a lot of convening. I think my message would be less about a project that failed, is to accept that with digital, failure is part of it, and to move on and learn from it. So we just a more recent experience actually convening a conference or a roundtable just at the beginning of May with the African Food Basket. And Karen and I decided to be the tech specialists behind the Zoom, and every possible thing that could happen, from the fact that Karen's Wi-Fi wasn't working this morning to the fact that people's links weren't working when they were trying to get onto Zoom, and just trying to do everything that we could ourselves to make the day work. We did, but we had to be really calm and not take it upon ourselves personally, and understand that when we are engaging the digital, to keep trying, expect that there will be glitches, but at the back end of things, or sort of the front facing things, because of the other people involved and people's patience, it worked out. So basically, if you do try something and it doesn't work, keep trying is my message, because even for the two of us who are pretty tech savvy, things do happen, and we just want to encourage people to try these collaborations and these innovations. Like, don't get scared by the term digital or technology. It really does start small, and yeah, that would be it. That would be our experience. I don't know if Karen wants to add to it.
I've got another really fantastic question that just came through the chat that I think Karen or Denise, whoever wants to jump in, what recommendations would you give to researchers that want to incorporate intersectionality in their research methods and knowledge products to ensure that groups that were historically underrepresented are included when reporting their study findings?
Do you want to do that one, Karen?
It's a big one.
Yeah.
It's a big one. I don't know. I think, Denise, you might be a bit more experienced than I am in terms of like research methods, but I would say that a good understanding of the population that are being served is needed to have an intersectional approach. So it's really about like I think what we said in terms of what is required when you do like programming is really about having a good understanding and a deep understanding of the work that you're doing for who and where, basically. If that makes sense. Denise, if you want to come in.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think there's a couple of things always to do is to find an organization that's doing the work that you want to model and see how they approached their mode of intersectionality. I think, Karen, we spent time today talking about Jay Pitter's work, because sometimes when we have presentations, we see links, and we don't take the time to read it. So right there, I think the best part is with reading the documents such as Jay Pitter's on that. I mean, and a good default is contact NAPSI will help you to think more deeply. But I always think it's like, see what's already been out there, because there are oftentimes we don't need to reinvent the wheel. So if you look at a good organization, shoot the person an email and quite explicitly ask them, what were your methods? What is it that you were doing? In addition to what Karen's saying, knowing your audience and what you want to do, it's often great and best to learn from others.
Can I, let me add 2 points real quick would be, so first and foremost, because we are talking about underrepresented groups, chances are the data is going to be incomplete, right? So I think that's probably one of those tension that you're going to be dealing with. So I think what Denise and Karen just talked about, working with an organization that already works with these groups would be the group that you are interested in studying would be key, but also you're going to want to take a systemic approach, meaning say, don't go to just one group. There's a good chance that if you really are trying to study intersectionality, there's a good chance that the first group you go to would serve only 1 or 2 dimension of the needs of this particular group. So going to more than one group to work on, really drawing together what that systemic view is on the experiences of these groups, truly looking at the intersectionality experience of these groups would require that you go to probably more like 3 to 5 groups to work with at the very least. And most importantly, for you to then develop the confidence and the ability to talk to them directly. Because put it this way, right? If intersectionality was that easy, these groups would already have solved it. So if you want to create new evidence, you're going to have to roll up your sleeves and really get into the flow of things yourself.
Thank you. I'll give our presenters a quick break to catch their breath and turn the spotlight onto Michelle, who's joining us from Community Foundations of Canada, who is ready and willing to answer some program-specific questions that you might have. So I've got a couple here that I think will be relevant to the folks on this call. Michelle, welcome. How does this particular funding program define public space? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here today, and thank you all for participating. So the definition of public space for this program would imply that local communities' public interest, so the project funded by the Healthy Communities Initiative must be in the local community's public interest by operating in public space and for public benefit. So projects in public space take place in any space owned or operated by a municipality, the provincial or federal government. And this could be, a sidewalk, street, park, recreation center, or non-commercial organization, which would be a nonprofit or educational institution. Or it could be an Indigenous community. So projects for the public benefit include projects serving specific communities that have been disproportionately affected by COVID-19.
Great, thank you. So what if I am a really keen individual community member, or maybe a business owner who's really community involved, and I have an idea for this program? Can I make an application?
So individuals, businesses, and social enterprise are not eligible to apply, but you could find a partner who is eligible to apply. So in the list of eligible organizations, you could find a partner, contact that local community organization, and you could enter in a partnership so that you could still be involved in the application, but you would actually have somebody else kind of leading that process.
Great, thank you. I see in the applicant guide that the program ends on June 30th, 2022, and I'm wondering, can the activities of a project funded through this program continue past that point?
So project activities not directly funded by the Healthy Communities Initiative can continue past the June 30th, 2020 deadline, or sorry, 2022 deadline. The other date's already passed, as long as the funding received has been spent. So funding recipients can't spend the Healthy Communities Initiative funding past the June 30th, 2022 deadline.
Thank you. I've got a question here that I think Jerry might be well positioned to answer. And someone is asking about whether there are resources or people or organizations in the community who might be able to talk through their digital project idea with them. So not necessarily about advising them on how to apply for this program, but kind of, tease out the aspects of their project that they want to think through and consult with them.
Yeah, so opening up the doors here. So you're welcome to talk to me about your digital solution. So send me an email. My contact information is in the deck itself. And I'll be happy to work through some ideas with you. Now, ultimately, the eligibility, you need to direct the eligibility of the idea itself, whether it's going to fit within CHCI funding framework or not. You do still have to email chci@communityfoundations.ca. They are the ultimate decider, educator for whether it'll be accepted or not. I can help you shape the ideas, but you still want to check with CHCI. Yes.
I'll just give a couple of minutes to see if any new questions come through the chat. I think we've been able to cover most or all of what's come through, and I don't want to miss any of them. So let's give everyone a couple of seconds. And if we don't hear anything, then we do have a quick poll that we'll throw up at the end of the session just to get a sense of how you all felt about the session, and I'll talk a little bit about the next one. Jerry, can you please repeat your email? You're muted, Jerry.
J for Jerry, KOH, that's my last name, at marsdd.com. Actually, why don't I do this?
Looks like Jerry is a brave person putting his email right into the chat. Copy paste that immediately, keep it on file.
I'm listed on my public mass directory, so.
So you're already living that life with your private information public. Okay, so it looks like we don't have any more specific questions coming in about the presentation or about the program. So if Karen and Denise don't mind popping on, just so I can thank you all for joining us. Thank you so much to Michelle. Thank you so much to everyone from Mars and NABC for giving us this really great presentation and being willing and able to answer all of our questions. We've got a quick poll that my colleague Jamie is going to throw up. And I also want to let you know that we have another community mobilization session coming up this Friday, May 28th. And the topic is maintaining a healthy sense of community within Indigenous communities during the pandemic. And that's presented by another partner of ours, the National Association of Friendship Centers. And they will be presenting this Friday, May 28th. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. Thank you so much to our presenters, and we will see you next time. Have a good day.